going on, ladies and gentlemen? Future Knight Eric here, and I'm coming at you with probably the last deck profile of 2022 with the deck I plan on taking into 2023 and using throughout the year. Now, there have been two Labrynth deck profiles on my channel actually relatively recently, but this take on the deck is a little bit different, as you can see by the presence of our Dinomorphia Rexstrom here. Now, this idea was conceptualized by a very good friend of mine, Byron. We had a testing session here at my house, during the holidays. Some of our locals closed down, so we had a testing session at my place, and he introduced me to this idea of Labrynth Dinomorphia. Very interesting take on the deck that I feel has a lot of potential, especially with the release of Big Welcome coming in Photon Hypernova, not locking you into your fiends from your extra deck and from your main deck, obviously. So huge shout outs to Byron for this idea, and this is my take on the idea, so the ratios that I've come up with and my thought process moving into the deck. And it is actually, I think, even more so inspired by this image. Should be popped up on screen. Unfortunately, I do not know who exactly the artist is, but I thought to myself, why does Dinomorphia and Labrynth have to fight when they could be used in the same deck? And some of the benefits of this mixture, or the synergy that arises within this deck, comes from the fact that the Dinomorphia cards, yes, they have hefty costs of paying half your life points, but that's sort of within the strategy, but they don't lock you out of special summoning or summoning into only dinosaurs, let's say. Labrynth, unfortunately, in the current state it's in with just Welcome Labrynth does, but you can sequence your effects in such a way that they don't restrict one another, and it puts a lot of pressure. Byron actually said to me that instead of playing traps that are decent, why not play traps that turn into bodies that, if they were traps, we would play? So for instance, Dinomorphia Rexstrom is essentially a skill drain. Alright, and yes, you could play skill drain in your deck, but now suddenly you're hindering half of your engine. You're hindering the Labrynth side. Your ladies are no longer invulnerable. You can't normal summon Oriana and get pluses. So instead of playing those trap cards that are really good but might also hinder the deck itself, we're playing trap cards that then turn into monsters that then only hinder and put pressure onto the opponent. So that's the general theory and synergy around the deck that Byron and myself came up with. And yeah, not much else to say. There is obviously going to be not a massive change when Big Welcome comes out, which I'm hoping is going to be called Grand Welcome. But anyway, but I will point out where those changes are, and then you can prepare for when that set comes out, because I do believe that is the first core set to come out in 2023. Alright, so starting off with our main deck, we of course are playing our 3 lady. She is absolutely incredible, and I'm pretty sure she's slowly going to become a staple in most trap decks, just as an absolutely huge body. Being able to not be destroyed by card effect or be targeted when there is a set card, being able to set any normal trap from your deck. It's just absolutely incredible. This card, I'm pretty sure, is going to end up in almost all trap decks. I think actually in my most recently of Darkness deck profile, I even say that you need to play 180, and I think you might even bump it up to 3. Why not? It's an absolutely incredible card. We are also playing only 2 Oriana, 1 Lovely and 1 Kuklock. So if you want to play this in its absolute best form, so it's most consistent, it's most probably competitive, you would cut Lovely. I just don't want to. Having the CR and absolutely loving the card, I do want to play it in some capacity, and at 1 I think it definitely deserves a spot. And with Grand Welcome or Big Welcome that comes out in Photon Hypernova, you then have 2 welcomes that you can trigger in the same turn, which means you can get to both Lady and Lovely depending on how your hand structures itself. The Oriana is very straightforward, obviously. It's one of your normal summons to get a hold of your Lady, or if you already have Lady, to get a hold of Welcome, or to get a hold of Labrynth. The Kuklock is I'm pretty sure at this point, amongst a lot of the Labrynth players, a staple one-of. I don't think you can cut it from the engine, unless of course you cut the Arianas in completely. But Coup Clock allows you that any hand that you draw that starts with Lady, as well as a way to get to Ariana, it means that your Ariana can then search Coup Clock and actually activate the set trap card that Lady sets, which is very, very strong in my opinion. So I do think at this point in the game, or at this point in the deck's history, Coup Clock is just an absolute staple as a one-of. And then I explained why we're playing the Lovely and Labrynth. We just play the one-of just to get that extra disruption, and also to help us recur our Fiends in grave, our Ladies and our Lovelies in grave. And then of course we are playing the 3, for now, the 3 Welcome. What I'm thinking when Big Welcome comes out is to play the 3 Big Welcome, and a lot of Labrynth decks that are merged with other engines actually don't really plus off of the fact that it bounces a card off your field to then summon the Labrynth monster. But in this deck, it actually helps with your follow-up quite a lot. And I'll explain to that when I get to the Dinomorphia cards. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is playing either 3 big and 1 welcome, or just 2 big and 1 welcome. Because although this is a Labrynth deck profile, obviously, Labrynth Dinomorphia, the Labrynth cards don't really push as much as the Dinomorphia cards do. They more so establish a controlled game state where you get into a grind. And currently in the tier element format, it's very difficult to grind against them. But out of all the versions of Labrynth that I've looked at, this seems to have the most potential. And once we get the ratios correct, once we have all our cards, that's when we can start building it to its most competitive form. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Labrynth engine. Now, for the Dinomorphia cards, which a lot of people might not know, and it's actually a deck I recently picked up, or the core I recently picked up, because of this theory crafting with my good friend Byron. They're actually really, really good. So Dinomorphia Theresia is essentially, when it's normal summoned, you set in any Dinomorphia card, and then if your life points are 2,000 less, she gains 500, so she becomes a 2,000 beat stick, which is pretty cool. Then, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish 1 trap from your graveyard. That's any trap, by the way, and then special summon 1 level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your graveyard except herself. There is only one other Dinomorphia card, and it's Diplos. Now, in a pure version, you're of course going to max out on both of these because you're playing a pure version and you need to be able to maintain advantage and maintain your engine. But because we're also playing the Labrynth cards, you have alternative win cons, and I feel like only 2 Diplos is correct in that sense. So this one is not as good as Theresia, and in actuality you don't even want to see this in any hands. You want to be able to send this off of the fusion cards once we get to those, but we'll give him a read regardless. So if it's normal special summoned, you can send 1 Dinomorphia card from your deck to your graveyard. Then if your life points are 2,000 or less, you burn your opponent for 500, which in and itself is a bit strange because it kind of goes against the whole point of the Dinomorphia cards, which is to have less life points than your opponent. And then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effects, banish a trap, summon a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia card except itself. So then that's when you'd be summoning your Theresia and then getting another set. It's very interesting how these cards are worded, level 4 or lower. That gives us some indication that we might be getting more Dinomorphias later down the line that are lower levels. But for now, these are the only 2 that we have access to. Okay, so those are pretty straightforward. Getting access to your traps in grave and also being able to set the traps. Now, when we get to the traps, the first one we're going to be talking about is the very best one, and in this deck is a 3 of, it is Dinomorphia Frenzy. Big synergy here, it is a normal trap card, but it is also your main fusion card for the Dinomorphia cards. During your opponent's main phase, you pay half your life points. Only opponent's main phase that is relevant, and then you fusion summon 1 Dinomorphia monster from your extra deck using 1 monster from your deck and 1 monster from your extra deck as fusion material. That is absolutely insane. So you do not have to have any Dinomorphia presence on your board or in your hand or in your graveyard to be able to use this card. You can literally just use it basically as a 1 card combo, which is absolutely insane. Then when your opponent activates a card or effect, while your life points are 2,000 or less, you can banish this card from your graveyard and you take no effect damage. A lot of the Dinomorphia cards have this extra effect to not take burn damage or effect damage from your opponent, and I think some of them also say that you don't take battle damage, which I think is a little bit more significant. You also start to pick up a theme with the Dinomorphia cards, being that you are also going to be paying half your life points to pretty much activate all of them. Another normal trap, this is Dinomorphia Domain. During the main phase, you pay half your life points, fusion summon one Dinomorphia fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, or field as material. So this is the one that then uses from your hand or field. Alternatively, you obviously want to be able to use from your deck, because then you take no neg in card economy. However, this is where the Dinomorphia Diplos comes in, because most of the Dinomorphia cards require you to fusion them using different named Dinomorphia cards. So you need to be able to have both of these in deck to resolve your domain. But of course, if you have one in your hand, or if you've got one in grave and one in hand, then you're still alright, but you would just obviously prefer to use your deck. And then of course the exact same thing, when your opponent activates a card or effect while your life points are 2,000 less, banish this, you don't no effect damage for the rest of the turn. The reason why we're only playing 2 of this is because it is obviously not as good as the Frenzy. The Frenzy, you literally need nothing else except Frenzy to trigger. The Domain, you need to have either presence on hand, field, or in your deck actually, which in the grind game sometimes doesn't happen. Then more synergy with the Labrynth cards, we are playing 2 Dinomorphia Brute. So this is pay off your life points, destroy 1 Dinomorphia monster you control and 1 card your opponent controls. And then this has the effect, again, if your life points are 2,000 less, you take no effect damage. This is obviously after you use your Thesia or Theresia, you will not be using the one on field to fuse off of your Frenzy or off of your Domain. You'll be using ones from deck. So you will just have a Thesia sitting there, and of course after you fused you'll have a Diplos engrave, in which case you can use your Brutes to then pop the Thesia to then cycle through your Diplos and your Thesia and get the traps engrave that you want. Because as you'll see when we get to extra deck, there's actually a way to utilize the Dinomorphia traps for more than just their effect damage protection, but we'll get to that when we get to the extra deck. And then the last Dinomorphia card I'm playing is Sonic. So this is just their counter trap. When your opponent activates a spell trap card while you control the Dinomorphia monster, pay off your life points, negate the activation if you do destroy that card, then you destroy 1 Dinomorphia monster you control. So the exact same thing. Your bodies that you end up leaving on the board is when you then get them to pop and then to cycle. And the cool and interesting thing is, this is why Big Welcome I think is really, really good. If for instance you started off with a Diplos and then you resolve either Brute or Sonic, and you pop your Diplos and you revive your Thesia, you get a set. Then when you activate Big Welcome, you can bounce back your Theresia, and then you have follow-up for next turn, or rather the turn after, because she gets to set another Dinomorphia trap. And then that's actually it for the Dinomorphia engine. It's a little bit heavier than the Welcome or the Labrynth engine, I would say. Another thing that you could play with the Dinomorphia cards is you could play the Monster Reborn-esque one. It summons back 2 Dinomorphia, or Dinomorphia monsters that add up to level 8, which is obviously 2 of them. But I decided not to play that because of the Labrynth cards, and I needed space for actual cards that are outside of the engine. Speaking of which, we are playing the one called by, and this, ladies and gentlemen, as I said in my Exorcister profile, is usually where I would plonk down 3 extra and say if they were prosperity, you should play them. I managed to finally get my 3 prosperities. This card actually makes this deck possible for me. You cannot play this with the extravs because obviously you do rely on your extra deck now, when in the pure version of Labrynth you don't really rely on it, you just really need it for dogmatic or punishment targets. But yeah, this card is obviously insane, being able to access the engine you don't have access to, or traps that just are absolute blowouts. Not much to say there. So that's it for the out of archetype spells, and then the out of archetype traps. This is really difficult because I wanted to keep the deck as low as possible. It is 41, and if you cut the lovely, it becomes 40. That is completely up to preference, obviously. But I'm playing 3 Infinite Impermanence just for some going second power. We are playing 3 Solemn Judgments. In case you didn't know, you can always pay half your life points, even if you get down to 1. When you're paying half, you just stay on 1 life points. And a big aspect of this deck is the bodies that you put up are so huge that even though you're paying half, and you're getting your life points really low, you'll still be able to survive just off of the sheer barriers that all of the monsters are. We are playing 3 Compulse. This is a glorified Labrynth card at this point. If you are playing Labrynth, you have to play this card at 3. This card, however, is up for debate. You can cycle between all the different traps that Labrynth can play. You can play IDP. There's just so many cards you can play in this spot, but Dinomorphia for me has been tried and true one of the best cards in my trap decks that I've played. And for the last 2 cards, we are of course playing Trap Trick and a Pointer of the Red Lotus. Trap Trick just being a nice third copy of pretty much all the normal traps, and then a pointer at 1 means that we can play the 1 and search it off of Our Lady and just get that extra advantage there. The trap lineup was actually extremely difficult to settle on. I was thinking about playing strikes, but then I don't really like strikes in the non-pure Dinomorphia deck, just because sometimes you won't actually have a chance to resolve it if you are below that threshold of 2,000 or rather 1,500 life points. But yeah, this is what I ended up settling on, and I think it's really strong. The Infinite Impermanence, you could argue, could be Evenlies if you really want to go full blowout against those really hectic decks that set up those really big boards, but of course Evenly going first is completely dead, whereas Imperm you can set and then use. Let's actually go into the extra deck so I can explain the Dinomorphia fusion cards. So we've got 3 Dinomorphia Rextrum. This card is essentially the boss monster of the Dinomorphia engine. He's absolutely insane. His materials are 1 Dinomorphia fusion monster plus 1 Dinomorphia monster. So you could make him straight off the bat off of Frenzy because you're using a Dinomorphia from your extra deck. However, there is another way we can go into him, which I will explain shortly. But for now, let's have a look at his actual effect. Your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters they control that have attack greater than or equal to your life points. Essentially a skill drain. To get to Rextrum, you're either going to be paying 4k or you're going to be paying 6k, half. So your life points will be really low, and then your opponent just won't be able to activate any of their, significant effects. This is they control, so it is only on field, so hand and grave can still trigger, which is a bit of a bummer, but at the end of the day, like I said, this is skill drain. You can only use each of the following effects of Dinomorphia Rextrum once per turn. It has a quick effect, you pay half your life points, and the attack of all monsters your opponent controls become equal to your life points, which means that all the monsters on the field then are immediately skill drained until the end of this turn. And then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 level 6 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your graveyard, so it can cycle into some of the other fusions that we have, as well as the main deck level 4s. So he's absolutely insane. 3000 beta. You can make the monsters into your life points, which means sometimes that they'll all be on 1000, which means OTK is very possible. Absolutely insane card. Then for the next fusion, we are playing 3 Kentrigina. I just call her Dinomorphia Mommy. But she is the second best fusion, I would say. She just needs 2 Dinomorphia monsters with different names. Obviously, if you're using Frenzy, you use your extra deck, and main deck, if you're using Domain, you just use your main deck. But her effect is actually really interesting. So she loses attack equal to your life points, and she is a 4000 attack. So once you've paid your life points to the point where you're at 1500, she is suddenly massive. She is also one of the reasons that you might consider playing Skill Drain in the deck, because if you Skill Drain her, she's just 4000, just because her effect is negated. Then, during the main phase, this is either or, quick effect, you can pay half your life points and banish 1 Dinomorphia normal trap from your graveyard. This effect becomes that trap's effect when that card is activated. So, use Frenzy to get into your Dinomorphia Mommy, and then you can then use Dinomorphia Mommy to banish the trap to then summon your Rextrum, which means you're getting 2 bodies that are actually relatively huge and off of 1 trap card. So if you do that math, you're paying 4,000 for your Frenzy, you're paying 4,000 for your Kentrigina, which means you're down to 2,000, and then you're paying another half life points for Rextrum to make everything on your opponent's side of the field equal to your life points, which means it pushes them all down to 1,000. And then you have 1,000 life points left, she's 3,000, and your Rextrum is 3,000. And I'm sure you can start to see now how we're getting to a point where this deck can push for OTK very, very heavily. Then for the last fusion, one that you don't necessarily go into very often, you're playing 3 Stealth Berginia. This is your Pterodactyl. Also 2 Dinomorphia monsters with different names. This is usually the one that you send off of Frenzy because you don't necessarily go into it too often. This says, while your life points are 2,000 or less, you do not pay life points to activate trap cards or Dinomorphia monster effects. So this obviously bypasses what I was saying about Strike, that I don't like to play Strike because when you're below that 2,000 threshold, Strike is very risky. This then means that you don't pay for them. But you're not going into this all that often, so again, you have to weigh up your options as to how you think your games are going to go. If you think you're going to go into very, very heavy grind games, the Strikes are probably relevant, but as I've just said, you put so much damage on the board, it's actually insane. Your games end a lot quicker than you'd think. Then you can only use each of the following effects of Dinomorphia Pterodactyl once per turn. When your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. So just extra burn, and then if this card is destroyed by battle card effect, you can special summon a level 4 low Dinomorphia. By the way, Mommy does the same thing. If she's destroyed, also you can summon back a Dinomorphia level 4 lower from your graveyard. So they all basically float into one another, which is absolutely insane. Your Rextrum can float into Mommy, and Mommy floats into your main deck monsters. So we're maxing out on these. There's no reason not to. Cards are absolutely insane. We are playing one of the fusion. We're playing the Cherry Exterior. I'm sure you can gauge what is in my side deck. And then we are playing a small XYZ package. We're just playing Abyss Dweller, Baguska, and Zeus. Because we now have access to more level 4s in the form of the Dinomorphia cards, these actually come up a lot more than you'd think. And Zeus is just obviously Zeus. And then we are, of course, playing 1 Muckraker and 1 Dark. I think the Muckraker in any Labrynth build right now is standard. You have to play a 1 in a pure version. You'd probably play 2. And then Dark because, of course, all the Dinomorphias and Labrynth monsters are Dark. Then, moving into the side deck, which surprisingly I actually put a lot of thought into for a deck that is relatively new concept. We are playing the 3 Lava Golem in the side. They're out of the main now because of the additional inclusion of the Dinomorphia engine, but you do have to play them in some capacity. It's Lava Golem. We are still playing 3 Shifter. Now, this does conflict not super heavily, but heavily enough with the Dinomorphia stuff. It just means that with your Frenzy, you have to go straight into Rextrum. You can't go into your Mommy first, just because you can't then banish the trap to get her effect, because your trap will not be in the graveyard. But I think it's worth playing just because of the impact it has against Tear Elements and other graveyard decks. So I do think it is definitely worth playing, at least in the side. We are playing the 1 Pankratops. I think it's appropriate being a dinosaur, but it's also just an absolutely insane card. The 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. We are playing 1 Zombie World and 1 Metaverse. I decided not to play Necro Valley, and if I were to play Necro Valley, you would have to essentially, side out the entire Dinomorphia engine, because the Dinomorphia engine requires you to interact with your graveyard quite a lot. Floating between the monsters, banishing the traps. So in this case, I just decided to play the 1 Metaverse in the Zombie World. Worst case scenario, the Metaverse gets you Labrynth, which gives you more disruption and extension. Then we are, of course, playing 2 Waking the Dragon. Shoutouts to Byron. Again, this was sort of his idea. The fact that you can set this off of Lady, and then it essentially protects your entire back row. No opponent unless they're completely confident of what you're playing in your extra deck, will pop this willingly. And in some instances, it's actually funny. They can go Lightning Storm, you can then go Chain Frenzy, Lady Chain to the Frenzy, to then set Waking the Dragon. Waking the Dragon will then be popped, and then you literally end on a crazy board of like Lady, Dinomorphia, Mommy, Rextrum, plus your Exterio, or the Warrior from the Planet Beyond. But obviously you don't want to give up your advantage too much. But yeah, this card's absolutely insane. And the reason we're playing 2 is also for Trap Trick. Exact same synergy there. If they're Lightning Storm, you just chain Trap Trick, set the Waking, which is pretty cool. And then the card that I did mention in the main deck, when we were doing the main deck, is Evenly Matched. If this is not in your main deck, it has to be in your side. That's just my theory behind it. When it is in your main deck, though, you have 3 extra side deck spaces. But I just thought Imperm was probably just a better bet, just because, again, some of your more rogue matchups, Imperm is actually really strong. And even against the elements, if you hit a well-timed kit, it can slow them down quite heavily. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the deck profile, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, it's a relatively newer concept. It has been thought of before, and I have seen some lists floating around, but I think this is the first coherent profile on YouTube. When looking for other lists, I did see that somebody had made up a deck and played some Master Duel with it, or some dueling book with it, but they didn't actually show the profile. So I have literally nothing to go off of for this. This is just my ratios. I did, of course, speak with Byron, who's had the original idea, and I think there's a lot of potential here, especially when Big comes out and there's no longer restrictions with your summoning from extra deck and from deck. And yep, that'll do it, ladies and gentlemen, for 2022. Thank you so much for this absolutely incredible year. We hit 1,000 subscribers. We got monetized. Thank you so much, obviously, to Solarpop and Unplug Yourself for continuing to sponsor us into the new year. Some exciting things coming that way. And yeah, shout outs to you, the audience, the people that support me and watch these videos. You're the reason I do this, and I really appreciate it. And this is Future Knight wishing you a happy new year, and I'll catch you in the next one.